Nitrogen cycle. Explained. Nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is a biogeochemical cycle in which nitrogen is transformed into numerous chemical forms as it moves through the atmospheric, land, and sea ecosystems. Both biological and physical methods can be used to convert nitrogen. Fixation, ammonification, nitrification, and denitrification are all important processes in the nitrogen cycle. Atmospheric nitrogen makes up the majority of the Earth's atmosphere, 78%, making it the most abundant source of nitrogen. However, the availability of atmospheric nitrogen for biological utilization is limited, resulting in a scarcity of usable nitrogen in many ecosystems. What exactly is the nitrogen cycle? The nitrogen cycle is a repeating cycle of processes during which nitrogen moves through both living and non-living things: the atmosphere, soil, water, plants, animals, and bacteria. In order to move through the different parts of the cycle, nitrogen must change forms. In the atmosphere, nitrogen exists as a gas, N2, but in the soils it exists as nitrogen oxide, NO, and nitrogen dioxide, NO2, and when used as a fertilizer, can be found in other forms such as ammonia, NH3, which can be processed even further into a different fertilizer, ammonium nitrate, or NH4NO3. There are 5 stages in the nitrogen cycle, and we will now discuss each of them in turn: fixation or volatilization, mineralization, nitrification, immobilization, and denitrification. In this image, microbes in the soil turn nitrogen gas, N2, into what is called volatile ammonia, NH3. So the fixation process is called volatilization. Leaching is where certain forms of nitrogen, such as nitrate or NO3, becomes dissolved in water and leaks out of the soil, potentially polluting waterways. Stage 1. Nitrogen fixation. In this stage, nitrogen moves from the atmosphere into the soil. Earth's atmosphere contains a huge pool of nitrogen gas, N2. But this nitrogen is unavailable to plants because the gaseous form cannot be used directly by plants without undergoing a transformation. To be used by plants, the N must be transformed through a process called nitrogen fixation. Fixation converts nitrogen in the atmosphere into forms that plants can absorb through their root systems. A small amount of nitrogen can be fixed when lightning provides the energy needed for N2 to react with oxygen, producing nitrogen oxide, NO, and nitrogen dioxide, NO2. These forms of nitrogen then enter soils through rain or snow. Nitrogen can also be fixed through the industrial process that creates fertilizer. This form of fixing occurs under high heat and pressure, during which atmospheric nitrogen and hydrogen are combined to form ammonia, NH3, which may then be processed further to produce ammonium nitrate, NH4NO3, a form of nitrogen that can be added to soils and used by plants. Most nitrogen fixation occurs naturally in the soil by bacteria. In figure above, you can see nitrogen fixation and exchange of form occurring in the soil. Some bacteria attach to plant roots and have a symbiotic, beneficial for both the plant and the bacteria, relationship with the plant. The bacteria get energy through photosynthesis, and in return, they fix nitrogen into a form the plant needs. The fixed nitrogen is then carried to other parts of the plant and is used to form plant tissues so the plant can grow. Other bacteria live freely in soils or water and can fix nitrogen without this symbiotic relationship. These bacteria can also create forms of nitrogen that can be used by organisms. Stage 2. Mineralization. This stage takes place in the soil. Nitrogen moves from organic materials, such as manure or plant materials, to an inorganic form of nitrogen that plants can use. Eventually, the plant's nutrients are used up, and the plant dies and decomposes. This becomes important in the second stage of the nitrogen cycle. Mineralization happens when microbes act on organic material, such as animal manure or decomposing plant or animal material, and begin to convert it to a form of nitrogen that can be used by plants. All plants under cultivation, except legumes, plants with seed pods that split in half, such as lentils, beans, peas, or peanuts, get the nitrogen they require through the soil. Legumes get nitrogen through fixation that occurs in their root nodules as described above. The first form of nitrogen produced by the process of mineralization is ammonia, NH3. The NH3 in the soil then reacts with water to form ammonium, NH4. This ammonium is held in the soils and is available for use by plants that do not get nitrogen through the symbiotic nitrogen-fixing relationship described above. Stage 3. Nitrification. The third stage, nitrification, also occurs in soils. During nitrification, the ammonia in the soils produced during mineralization is converted into compounds called nitrites, NO2, and nitrates, NO3. Nitrates can be used by plants and animals that consume the plants. Some bacteria in the soil can turn ammonia into nitrites. Although nitrite is not usable by plants and animals directly, other bacteria can change nitrites into nitrates, a form that is usable by plants and animals. This reaction provides energy for the bacteria engaged in this process. The bacteria that we are talking about are called Nitrosomonas and Nitrobacter. Nitrobacter turns nitrites into nitrates. Nitrosomonas transform ammonia to nitrites. Both kinds of bacteria can act only in the presence of oxygen. The process of nitrification is important to plants, as it produces an extra stash of available nitrogen that can be absorbed by the plants through their root systems. Stage 4. Immobilization. The fourth stage of the nitrogen cycle is immobilization, sometimes described as the reverse of mineralization. These two processes together control the amount of nitrogen in soils. Just like plants, microorganisms living in the soil require nitrogen as an energy source. These soil microorganisms pull nitrogen from the soil when the residues of decomposing plants do not contain enough nitrogen. When microorganisms take in ammonium, NH4+, and nitrate, NO3, these forms of nitrogen are no longer available to the plants and may cause nitrogen deficiency or a lack of nitrogen. Immobilization, therefore, ties up nitrogen in microorganisms. However, immobilization is important because it helps control and balance the amount of nitrogen in the soils by tying it up or immobilizing the nitrogen in microorganisms. Stage 5. Denitrification. In the fifth stage of the nitrogen cycle, nitrogen returns to the air as nitrates are converted to atmospheric nitrogen, N2, by bacteria through the process we call denitrification. This results in an overall loss of nitrogen from soils as the gaseous form of nitrogen moves into the atmosphere. Back where we began our story. Nitrogen cycle diagram. Marine nitrogen cycle. In the ocean, the nitrogen cycle is also an important process. While the overall cycle is similar, the participants and modes of nitrogen transport in the ocean differ. Nitrogen enters the water system by precipitation, runoff, or atmospheric N2. Because phytoplankton cannot use nitrogen as N2, it must undergo nitrogen fixation, which is primarily conducted by cyanobacteria. Fixed nitrogen would be depleted in the marine cycle in around 2,000 years if sources were not replenished. For the beginning synthesis of organic matter, phytoplankton requires nitrogen in physiologically accessible forms. Plankton excretion causes ammonia and urea to be released into the water. The downward migration of organic matter removes nitrogen sources from the euphotic zone. Atomic mass of nitrogen. Nitrogen has an atomic mass of 14.01 AMU, 14.01 g/mol. Bacteria and fungi aid in the decomposition of organic matter at the end of the nitrogen cycle, where the nitrogenous chemicals are dissolved into the soil and utilized by plants anew. The nitrogenous molecules in the soil are then converted to nitrogen gas by microorganisms. Creatures absorb nitrogen by eating these plants or other nitrogen-containing animals. Humans absorb the proteins from these plants and animals, and the nitrogen is incorporated into our system. Most common exam questions asked on nitrogen cycle. 1. What is the summary of the nitrogen cycle? ANS. The nitrogen cycle is a series of events in which nitrogen passes through both living and non-living organisms, including the atmosphere, soil, water, plants, animals, and microbes. In order to progress through the various stages of the cycle, nitrogen must change forms. 2. What is the significance of the nitrogen cycle in life? ANS. The nitrogen cycle is important because nitrogen is a necessary nutrient for life on Earth. Amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins, and nucleic acids, which are the building blocks of genetic material, both contain nitrogen, RNA, and DNA. 3. In the nitrogen cycle, what is assimilation? ANS. The production of organic nitrogen compounds such as amino acids from inorganic nitrogen compounds found in the environment is known as nitrogen assimilation. Plants, fungi, and some bacteria that can fix nitrogen gas, N2, rely on the ability to assimilate nitrate or ammonia to meet their nutritional demands. 4. Where do plants obtain their nitrogen? ANS. Soil plants obtain their nitrogen from the soil, which has already been fixed by bacteria and archaeobacteria in the soil, and some plant roots have the ability to convert molecular nitrogen from the air, N2, to ammonia, NH3, breaking the molecular nitrogen triple bond. 5. What makes the nitrogen cycle unique? ANS. Nitrogen is an essential ingredient for all living organisms. The nitrogen cycle depicts the movement of nitrogen through many objects, including the atmosphere and the ground. Nitrogen is rarely found in its pure form since it must be fixed in order to be used by living beings. Thank you for watching.